Welcome back to this short episode of the SPARKR podcast, where it is my privilege to talk to exceptional people about strategy, innovation, and leadership. My name is Christian Lundsgaard, and today's guest is Rory Stewart, a man with an extraordinary biography and a sharp intellect. Rory was a British cabinet minister and is known globally today as the co-host of the highly recommendable podcast, The Rest is Politics. In addition, Rory acts as Professor for Grand Strategy at the Yale Jackson School of Global Affairs. And before that, the expert communicator and public intellectual served as a soldier, a diplomat, and a provincial administrator in Iraq. He also walked across Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nepal, and wrote fascinating books about these experiences. Tapping into his vast and deep knowledge, I had an enjoyable and compact conversation with Rory about navigating conflict, dealing with a challenging world, and acting as a true leader within it. So please enjoy this short but rich chat with the diplomat at heart, Rory Stewart. Rory, it's an absolute pleasure to have the chance to talk to you. You've seen a lot in your career in British politics, as a diplomat, for example, and I consider you also as a very open-minded and observant intellectual. So I'm curious, how has your worldview or the way you navigate the world evolved during your career?
Well, I think the most fundamental change is that I grew up in a world in which the ideas of liberal democracy, the ideas of liberal economics, the ideas of a rules-based order, they're basically the idea that we were all trying to be a little bit more like Denmark, seemed to me very fundamental. And I continued to try to fight for this vision right the way through to the Brexit referendum in 2016. But looking back now, the world was probably changing 12 years earlier, probably as early as 2004. The world was beginning to move against this vision. And we're entering a new world in which things which seemed quite straightforward, saying, for example, everybody should have a vote, we should compromise, the world is complicated, but we're going to have liberal values, we will discuss, and be patient and everything will get better, is completely out of sync with large sections of the population. We don't know. In the US, it sometimes seems to be half the population. In Europe, maybe 30% of the population are pushing for a much more aggressive populist vision. And I think that's the most fundamental change in my life as a politician.
I absolutely agree. And now on the opposite view, people always tend to ask, what changes in the next 5 years or 10 years, especially like the technology types, the business types. But I'm always curious to ask the question, what stays the same? Because the things that stay the same, that's what we can build strategies with or build a future on. So what are like mechanisms or principles that you think we can rely on?
I think that's a really smart question. And I'm slightly thinking on my feet because you're the first person to ask me that. But one very fundamental thing is that humans will continue to disagree with our priorities. You know, we're talking here, for example, in a very beautiful valley in Switzerland. There will be, in the same piece of land that we look at outside our window now, some people may want to put in wind turbines, other people may want to build a factory, somebody may want to bury nuclear waste, somebody may want to preserve it as a beautiful tourist medieval landscape, some people may want to build affordable housing, somebody else may want to build a skyscraper. And the point that I'm making is that one thing that will not change is there is no technocratic scientific answer to these questions. These are conversations between humans who disagree. And our society has to accept a situation where we have different values, different priorities, where we cannot do everything at the same time. You know, the same piece of ground outside cannot at the same time be a beautiful tourist landscape and also all those other industrial landscapes. So what will remain is the necessity for highly complex conversations and democratic structures that allow them to happen. In Switzerland, it could be referenda, government at a canton level. In the United States, it could be a different form of constitution. But that will remain. And it doesn't matter how much AI comes along or social media comes along, it's never going to be able to overcome the fact that the interests of my business is not the same as yours, my family is not the same as yours, my position in society is not the same as yours.
I think that's a great analysis. And it leads me to two more questions. I'll start with one of them. So you now just said it's complicated, and oftentimes we don't have like clear-cut answers that are objectively just the right way to go. So it's hard and complicated. And yet, if you want to reach agreements or if you want to reach majorities in politics, then you require simple messaging. At least that's my hypothesis. And so I'm curious, throughout your career, what have you learned about effective communication? Be it to create understanding or curiosity or to avoid conflict or whatever effective communication means to you. What have you learned about it?
I think what I've learned is that, as you say, in the end, you have to be simple. But to be simple takes an incredible amount of thought, because you have to make sure that the simple 3 words that you arrive at really represent the most truthful, fundamental analysis of the world. I like to think, maybe of, a Japanese samurai with his sword. In the end, he makes a very simple cut, but he needs to train for 15 years to know what that cut is. This sounds a bit pretentious for a politician, but if I give an example from my own life, I worked, for example, managing the prisons in England and Wales. And I spent 6-9 months worrying about what to do, because they were a mess in every way. Prisons in most countries, but particularly in places like Britain, almost everything you can imagine is going wrong. And in the end, I decided the fundamental problem was that they were not safe, that if we could make these places safe, then all the other things, education, stopping reoffending, would follow from it. And the transformation for me was getting away from the kind of academic, here are 2,000 problems in the prison system, to say, I want prisons which are safe for prisoners, safe for prison officers, safe for families, and I will resign unless they get safer in the next 12 months. But it took me nearly 8 years as a politician to learn how to do that.
Yeah, I think the simplicity is key. And I want to make a quick advertising for your excellent podcast, The Rest is Politics, because I think you had a conversation with Miss Ardern from New Zealand. And there she quoted a politician. And I absolutely loved this conception that this politician had, apparently. People need a place or somewhere to live, something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for. And I think that's simplicity in its most beautiful form, where you can derive all sorts of things from this very simple core. I think you love that as well.
I absolutely love it, because often politics operates on either too abstract and grand a level. We're trying to change the world, save the world, which often becomes sort of impossibly vague and beyond us. We're trying to pretend we're Luke Skywalker when in fact we're living in a small town in Switzerland trying to get on with our life. Or the other possibility, which is that we lose sight of it in just too many details. What we're trying to do is fix the potholes or work out how to improve the broadband connection. And we miss that central point, which is, what is it that we are doing for people today? And that idea, which is about your house, your job, your family, and your purpose in life, is so powerful, because we can get so distracted into other things. And politicians can become very unsettled by trying to do things that they can't do. If they could return to those fundamental things, I think it would provide wonderful clarity and energy in politics.
We talked about complexity earlier, and you have encountered many complex situations in all sorts of areas. So I'd be curious, what does complexity mean to you, and how to approach it in a sense of how do you approach it so that you can get into a state of action? Because complexity can always also be kind of like paralyzing, and you might need to reduce it or to work with it so that you become actionable.
Yeah, I think the answer is that the best way of navigating complexity is through conversations with other people who are looking at the same complex situation and learning from people who really have experience and developing not the sense that you as an individual are going to be able to understand all the intricate complexity of a difficult situation, but getting a sense of people and judgment and tone. So, for example, if I were looking at something like air quality, that the problem in many of our countries, that in our cities, the air quality is bad, I could get completely lost in the chemistry of air quality. And it would not be an appropriate thing for me to do. What I need to do is know enough about it so that when I hear the expert on air quality speak, I can begin to sense their judgment, the clarity of their minds, the way they navigate things, the things they dismiss, the things they include. And I begin to recognize from some other field in my life, maybe in that case, people talking about Afghanistan, that this expert talking about air quality has some of the same qualities of pragmatism, of courage, of being able to cut to the essentials, of being able to challenge the conventional wisdom, say difficult things. So navigating complexity is not about the individual leader becoming omniscient and believing that their mind alone can handle all the complexities of an issue. It's about partnering with other better informed people, but being able to distinguish almost through feel and experience one expert from another, find what the better form of expert is, what the form of expert that appeals to you. So to conclude, there could be two professors who have studied air quality for 40 years, but your job as a leader is to detect which one of those professors is the person whose judgment you want to follow. And that will not be based on how many doctorates they have or how many academic publications they've made. It will be something more. It will often be a question of character, a question of judgment that you sense.
Thank you so much for that. You were in multiple leadership positions yourself, and you also witnessed many leaders in action. And so I'm curious, what are your observations of what differentiates a good from an outstanding leader? Maybe what kind of traits or habits have you observed that are beneficial to be an effective leader?
Well, one of my great heroes is a man called David Gauke, who was the Justice Secretary in Britain. And he was probably the best leader I saw in British politics because he combined three things. He was able to delegate, but able to communicate to the whole operation that he meant to delegate, that the person he delegated to had his authority, had his support. So he didn't just say, you can get on with this, in which case the system will resist the person. He said, get on with this, and I want you to come every week and explain to me what you're doing with the team so they can see that I'm supporting you and that your agenda is my agenda. The second thing I think he was incredibly good at is listening to very difficult truths without interrupting, giving shy junior people an opportunity to explain where a real problem was without jumping in and trying to fix it straight away. And the third thing I think he had was real courage. He wasn't just trying to make people happy. He wasn't just trying to be consensual. He did very tough things. He froze pay increases. He laid people off. He shut operations. He challenged his cabinet colleagues. But he did it without ego. He did it without presenting himself as this kind of grand hero. And by doing so, was able to get things done much, much more rapidly. So it was a beautiful model of leadership. The problem is that because he was, in some ways, quite a quiet man, people didn't recognize him as a leader. They recognized the kind of bigger, more macho figures, when he was actually much, much better at changing the world than they were.
Thank you very much, Rory. It was an absolute pleasure. That's all the time we have. And in this short amount of time, I think it was an absolutely enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Rory for this quick chat that we had together at the Swiss Economic Forum. For more exciting conversation with exceptional minds talking about strategy, innovation and leadership, please consider subscribing to the SPARKR podcast in your favorite podcast app. And if you liked this episode, please leave a 5-star rating for the show and share it with a friend. That would be much appreciated. And if you want to continue straight away with another episode of the SPARKR podcast, I recommend you an inspiring conversation on resilience with the polar explorer and mountaineer Anja Blacher, or a discussion with ex-NASA director Thomas Zurbuchen on how to build and lead high-performing teams that put robots on Mars. Just look out for these episodes in the SPARKR podcast feed. My name is Christian Lunsgaard, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you back to another episode soon, where I, as always, uncover the mindsets, tactics, and insights of exceptional people to enable you, today's innovators, strategists, and leaders. It was a great pleasure having you with me this episode. I appreciate your time and wish you a successful week.